So next I want to talk around what are the stages of development which organizations go through with their culture. So I've been doing a lot of work in this space recently, and so has C.C.L. So I want to give you the foundations for understanding culture and how they move. So the first thing to know is around what is culture. So from a C.C.L. perspective, we look at it as being the beliefs and the practices, or the beliefs and the behaviors. So people traditionally have said it's how people do things around here. We would also say it's what people believe around here. And the reason is because the beliefs drive the behaviors. So it's both those factors, beliefs and behaviors. So as you begin doing culture change work, the first thing you want to think about is from where to where do you want to get to with your culture? And C.C.L., who's been looking at this topic for over 30 years, the big thing we've seen is that organizations actually move through stages of development with culture. And there are three main stages I want to point out to you now. So the way we tend to draw it visually is as a snowman. And so the first stage of development which organizations can go through is that they can be in what's called the dependent conformer stage of development. So this is a sort of cultural environment where it's very command and control, it's very hierarchical, people are dependent on authority figures to tell them what to do, there's lots of rules and regulations, and people conform to those regulations. And you've probably experienced workplaces which are like this. At times it can be completely suitable to have that sort of culture, but often it really restricts what you're able to achieve. The next stage of development is called the independent achiever stage, and this is probably where most organizations have a center of gravity at the moment. The independent achiever stage is very much around individual heroic leaders. So their leadership culture is characterized by people who try and strike out on their own, get big results individually, and they are rewarded and recognized for this sort of thing. So it's sort of the John Wayne mentality of leadership. And you can probably think of some famous leaders who fit that mold, but it's all about them. They're the independent achievers. And so you have organizations which are full of that culture. And so it's good up until a point. The upsides of it is people get very motivated, it's very merit-based. As long as you can get work done on your own, it works really well, or within your silos. The downsides of it is it tends to produce more individualistic, more selfish behaviors, and it tends to produce a lot of silos. And if you don't need to collaborate horizontally across the business or outside of the organization so much, it's fine. The problem is, nearly all the organizations we're seeing now are creating strategies and visions which require interdependent collaboration across lots of boundaries. And they're getting stuck because their culture is at this independent achiever stage. So the next level up is called the interdependent collaborator stage of development. And so we're seeing more and more organizations push into this space now. And this space is very much around seeing outside of just you and your own needs, or me and my team, and it's thinking interdependently across the system of the organization and even outside of the organization. So people start to see much more systemically. They start to think across the boundaries of the organization. So operations starts coordinating much more with manufacturing or sales or marketing. And so it actually brings on a new mindset of how people think. Collaboration becomes much easier because people aren't just focused on their own personal individual results. So this is a culture, and so you start to see this in organizations or pockets of it. And why this one really matters at the moment is because lots of people are creating strategies which require this sort of culture in order to execute that strategy. Now it's also worth pointing out that your organization won't all be at just one stage of this culture. At the front lines, you might find there is more dependent conformer type behaviors and mindsets, and at different parts of the organization, there may be more independent achiever with pockets of interdependent collaborative behavior and thinking. but your organization itself will have some sort of center of gravity. And so it's in this stage one of moving your culture. And so from our perspective, it's not just around culture change, which denotes change in any direction. It's actually culture development, because there are stages which you will probably move through when you develop your culture. So stage one is doing a diagnosis for the organization of what sort of culture do we require in order to be successful and execute our strategy versus what have we got. So the way we'll do this with organizations very often will be with the CEO and his or her leadership team. And we'll be asking them to do a simple self-diagnosis. First, we'll get them to tell us about the business challenges they're facing and the business strategy that they've got. And then we'll ask them a couple of simple questions. First of all, we'll say to each person individually and then collectively as a group, what sort of culture do you require in order to execute that? And we'll ask them to draw a line, come to some consensus, draw a line across the snowman to show what sort of leadership they require. And often, most commonly, they'll draw a line somewhere across the interdependent collaborator category. And we'll give them more criteria for each of these. And then we'll say to them, what sort of culture do you actually have at the moment? What's the current culture? And they'll draw a line, often somewhere much lower. And what they've just done, as they've worked through this as a group, is they've done a quick gap analysis. Now, we haven't told them they need to change. No one's done it from the outside. It's been a discussion with the key people who have said that we will not be able to execute our strategy with our current culture. And that gets a whole lot of attention and a whole lot of energy in the room. And what they really want to know is, so tell us, how do you move a culture from down here to up here? And there's a series of steps, and it's going to involve that team to start with. And so in the next video, I'll go into how do you actually start to move a culture once you've done the diagnosis and recognize that you need to.